Hello and welcome to Self Power Now, where empowering women share their stories and advice about life, work, happiness, love, and success. I'm your host, Debbie Giussoni, and I'm so glad you're here with us today. So sit back and enjoy the show. My guest today is Shelli Brunswick, COO of Space Foundation, a nonprofit organization offering information, education, and collaboration for the global space and space-inspired industries. Shelli was named the 2020 Diversity and Inclusion Officer and Role Model of the Year by Women Tech Network. She plays an active role with many cultural, space, and business organizations around the world and is always an advocate for empowering women, which is why I wanted Shelli on the show. Welcome, Shelli. Great to have you here with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Debbie. I'm honored to be joining you and your listeners. And again, as you said, I love talking about empowering women, empowering diversity and inclusion. So this is a wonderful podcast.
Yes, I love women who empower women. Shelli, you've actually had such a really interesting career that started in the U.S. Air Force, which really is not the traditional path for most women when they think of their career path. How and when did you decide to go into the Air Force? Like, did you come from a military family?
Well, that's a really interesting question. So I am not a traditional path, go on to college and know everything I want to do. I actually was more an exploratory type of person. I loved exploring things, doing different things. And when it came time to decide if I wanted to go to college or the military, our high school had a program with the military where the military would come in and give you an ASVAB, an aptitude battery test. And I volunteered to take it because I'm a joiner. And during that testing process, it kind of identified some of the areas where I had strengths. And then the military recruiters started calling me saying, are you interested? You're really good in this area and we could really use you in this area. And so as I looked at those options and the option of going on to college and taking on debt and not sure what I wanted to major in, the military seemed like a great option. I wanted to see the world. I'm an explorer. And so I decided to join the military, follow this path, earn the GI Bill, go to school at night and see the world. And I was fortunate that the military, my first assignment was Turkey. And then I went on to get stationed in Germany. And then I followed that on to coming back to the US to Colorado Springs.
So you went right from high school and you mentioned that it's not the traditional role and that a lot of people know what they already want to do. But I think these days, a lot of people don't know what they want to do. I talk to young people all the time, whether it's my nieces and nephews, and it seems like a lot of people are lost in terms of what they want to do in life and where they want to go and what kind of job and what kind of company and whatnot. But even though you said you didn't know what you want to do, it seemed like you actually kind of clicked in right away.
Well, as I kind of said, I'm a joiner. I did some self-reflection before your podcast, and I've looked back over my life, and I like people. I'm an extrovert. I've been tested for Myers-Briggs, and I'm actually off the chart for extrovert. So I like people. I like joining. I like groups. And when the military came along, again, I had really only decided to join for 4 years. I went to Turkey and Germany. I was going to separate and then go on to college. But I just really loved what I was doing for the military. I loved the culture of service before self, integrity, teamwork, being part of something bigger than myself. So every time the opportunity came to separate, I chose to stay in the Air Force. And after 12 years being an enlisted airman, being a personnel specialist, an HR expert, I actually completed my degree going to school at night and applied to become an officer. So I loved what the military offered in that opportunity to belong to something bigger than yourself.
And did you come from a big family?
I did not come from a big family. So you and I are probably in the same age bracket. So at the time when I was growing up, my mother was a single parent, and that was before being a single parent was the norm.
Right.
So I was a little different than a lot of my friends that I went to school with, having a single parent, being what they called at that time a latchkey kid, meaning I had a key to the house. I came home at night. My mom was at work. I made my own dinner. but it also allowed me to be what I already was. I'm an only child, so I'm very independent, able to entertain myself. So although I love people and I love being an expert, being an only child, I also know how to, as they say, play by myself. I'm happy to read a good book or take a class online or spend time just thinking about things. So that time being independent also helped me develop being alone. And alone is a good thing too. You can't always self-reflect and grow when you're always with others.
Right. We always want so much stimulus around us, right? And with social media and whatnot, it seems like the norm is more to just keep doing rather than being alone. It sounds like you had a very strong female role model around you with your mother. And I think you mentioned there was another when we spoke earlier. Was your grandmother still alive while this was going on?
So my grandmother is still alive. She is 95 years old as of October 2021. So I come from a long line of strong women. My grandmother, my mother, my aunt, who is my godmother, Barb. I come from a long line of strong women, very independent women, hardworking women. And those skills were passed on to me as well, that, if you want something in life, go get it. Nobody ever said, well, you're a girl, you can't do that, or that's not something for you to pursue. I was able to do everything I wanted to do. I played sports. I was in, I did plays and all kinds of activities, speech and debate. I had all kinds of activities I was interested in high school. And the military was an easy opportunity to carry that on. You get to move around.
Was your mother supportive of that initially when you made that decision?
Well, as you can imagine, being a single mom with your only child and your child says, I want to join the military and take an assignment as far away from here as possible. Turkey at that time was the other end of the planet.
Right.
So she did cry, but she's always been supportive of me. She's always been my biggest champion. Now I'm married, so my husband is my second biggest champion. But my mom has always been supportive, and she was actually a really strong role model for me as well. So my grandmother was a strong role model. And then my mom, being a single parent, she worked in manufacturing. So again, she was a single parent. She worked in manufacturing, which is not an industry for women. She started entry level working on the manufacturing floor. And every time an opportunity came up, she applied for it, and she eventually worked her way up into being senior management. And so again, it was a great role model for me to see that you can start here, but you can work hard, you can learn, and you can continue to grow and develop. And again, the military offers some great career paths for individuals on how you can grow and set a career together.
Mm-hmm. Would you recommend that path for young women today? And what's different now than when you went in?
Well, a couple of things are different. When I went in, there weren't as many women. So it was a much smaller demographic for women. And I would also say, when I first enlisted in the military in the early 80s, women were not pilots. They were not all these extra things. Now, careers are open to women to be Navy SEALs, to be fighter pilots. So for women, the sky, as I say, the sky is no longer the limit. There are no limits. There are great opportunities in the military, whether you want to be in healthcare, aviation, personnel. I did space acquisition, which I call a project management, space project management. So there are great opportunities. Plus, the military provides you with professional development, career growth. And even if you want to come in for a few years right out of high school or right out of college, it gives you a great foundation to build your skill set and then go on to contribute to the greater good in another capacity.
Well, this is great information, especially if we have mothers listening whose children really are lost. This might be a little bit of a good piece of advice or something they can steer them towards or even open their eyes towards. I love how you talked about your all these female role models in your life. So it's no surprise to me that now you're empowering other women. And I think early family relationships truly shape our life paths. Whether they are supportive or not, they shape our life paths and they shape our decisions. And you were very lucky to have very supportive relationships in that arena. And then as we get older, we learn from all sorts of other relationships. I think think, in fact, I think everything we learn about life and work, we learn from relationships, whether that be, our family relationships, our work, our friends, platonic, romantic, etc. You had, that unconventional childhood at the time with the single mother. And you're right, at that time, that was unconventional. That kind of singled you out, I'm sure, as well. But then you went into the military, which was kind of a very family type environment in a different, much more disciplined, but very family like. But you were still young and you were learning. And I remember you told me that you mentioned you were married at a very, very early age in the military and then divorced while you were still in the Air Force. What were your aha moments that led you to marriage in the first place that young, and then ultimately to ending that marriage and moving on with your life? What did you learn from that experience?
Well, the first thing was my ex-husband is a wonderful person. And I want to say that, and I'm super happy that his life is moved on and he's very successful. At the time in the military, many people get married young. So I was young at the time, 20 years old. It was kind of the normal thing people did. You meet somebody, you get married, and then you start a family. And we were still very young in our early 20s. And that was not the path I wanted. As you could imagine, I'm not the traditional path person. And so
right, that's why I asked you what led you there in the first place. So was it just the environment? Everybody else was doing it?
I don't know if it was everybody else was doing it. I mean, I really thought my ex-husband was amazing. He was a wonderful person. He had a wonderful family. But at the end of the day, after being married a certain period of time, what I really realized was we just were not the right fit for each other. I had very aspirational goals. I had high achieving goals. I wanted to become an officer in the Air Force. I wanted to get my degree. I didn't know what was after that, but, I wanted to continue to serve in a different capacity. And my husband had different goals. So it wasn't really that we weren't right that it was a bad marriage or we were bad people. It was just that we had really different goals. And getting married so young, you don't know that much about yourself. I'm really happy that a lot of people take more time to get married nowadays. We see that, now we're worried, will people ever get married? I see
right. It's going the opposite. I have a lot of friends who have children in their 30s that are not married and not with someone on a regular basis. And it's, and the parents are like, wow, are they ever going to get married? So it's swung. The pendulum has swung totally in the opposite direction now.
But I think you have a stronger chance for a successful marriage. Not saying that, my grandparents were married young, 18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
But nowadays we're so different and the world is evolving so quickly. And there are so many opportunities and different career paths that for my ex-husband and I, for what we both wanted aspirationally, it just wasn't a right fit. And we were both so young. So I just kind of look at it like, I don't even consider it a divorce. I mean, I know legally it's a divorce, but I count it as we were young.
A separation of ways, so to speak.
A separation of ways. And I wish him the best of success and hope he's happy. And I am remarried. And my current husband, Jerry, who is fabulous, we're at a different point in life where he is in life and I am in life, and he's supportive of my career. And we're all as we're in the boat rowing together and we're going in the same direction. And so it's just a much better fit. And so I'm not saying anybody should not get married young or get old. But what I would say is before you get married or commit to an individual, you both have to really talk about what your goals are, what your desires are for careers and children and where you want to be. And, because along the way, you're going to have challenges. And if you can't set the foundation for your relationship before you get married, it will not work its way out after you're married. And that was something I learned in my first marriage, was that we never had those conversations because we were too young and naive.
Right. And you change and things, sometimes you are a perfect fit with someone, and then all of a sudden goals do change or life does change and you go separate ways. But I believe that there's no relationship that is ever wasted, because there's always a learning curve in every relationship. And I do also believe that people are put into your path at exactly the right time in life. And whether that's, a relationship that lasts for a year or lasts for 10 or lasts for 40, it doesn't really matter. And it's kind of similar to even jobs too, because I feel like, when you join a company, you have a certain relationship as well with that company. And as you said, things are different. Like it used to be that people used to be married so long. Well, also people used to stay at the one company. Remember, I mean, my father and my father's generation, they'd stay at one company in one career for their entire lives. And now there are so many different options, and you're almost not expected to stay in a career, that long. And I'm very happy to hear that you're happily married now. How long have you been married now, Shelli?
It's been 6 years, but my husband and I have been together 16 years.
Wow.
And I will just share, we met on a tour in Thailand. We both love travel and we met traveling. And so I just highlight that will be another story for us. But if you meet somebody doing something you both love, you already have some common ground. So that we both met on a tour traveling the world just highlights that we already had one foundation piece together.
I think that's great advice for people, especially if you want to stay with someone for a long time. You've got to have some common interests, right? Any other advice you have for women that are already in relationships, whether that be, partnerships or marriage, to keep those relationships going strong? I'm sure I have a lot of listeners who have been married for quite a while, and it's hard to keep a marriage going strong.
Well, I'm very fortunate. So my husband is a retired firefighter. So we only have one career that we're both focused on, and that's my career. And I'm super grateful that he's very supportive in whatever my career is and where I want to go. However, most women and men are in relationships where both individuals have careers. And sometimes one individual may have to take a backseat to the other, especially in military marriages, right? If you're the military person and your spouse follows you to all your assignments, that could be challenging. Or I even know university presidents, sometimes they move around to other university and colleges as their career goes and their spouse moves with. So sometimes someone's career may be the priority over another career. And so how do you balance that and work that together to make sure one spouse still feels empowered and equal and contributing to the relationship in unique ways? And a lot of it, I think, has to do with open lines of communication. What are the things you both love doing, and how do you refresh that passion outside your careers that keeps your marriage strong? Because careers are temporary, right? I mean,
yes.
I love what I do. I mean, I'm at the
but you aren't what you do. You're
exactly.
You're not what you do. Yeah, in life, you are a person outside of that. Yes.
And my tombstone's not going to say Space Foundation COO. It's going to say, it's going to say Shelli Brunswick, loving wife of Jerry, and so that's the other thing you have to remember. Careers are important, but they're not more important than the people in your life.
Yeah, relationships are so important, whether that be your family or your partnership or even friendships. I think friendships, especially among women, are so extremely important to stick together and to support each other. And I also think for relationships, whether that's, a career or a platonic or romantic relationship, that there has to be this balance of both a dependency and an independency, right? You have to have a lot in common, but I think you also have to have lives outside of that relationship as well, because you're not your job, and you also not defined by your relationship either. I mean, years and years ago, maybe, the woman was the wife and that's it. And she was defined by the husband, taking the name and all that. But these days, I know for myself and my husband, we have a lot in common. We love to do a lot of things together, but we also have our own groups of friends where we do things separately. And I think that's a really healthy balance.
I absolutely agree. So as you said, I did not take my husband's name, and it was actually his idea because I had already had a successful career before we were married. So
yeah, I did the same thing. I kept mine. Yeah.
So I think, and again, it was his idea, but I completely agree with you. We should all have our interests and passions and hobbies that still make us who we are, and then who make us. And I think that brings more to the relationships, whether it's your parents or your spouse or friends and colleagues, by being independent and what refreshes you. I mean, there are things I love to do. So one of the things I love to do, and this is funny, is I love to do photography and wildlife. Well, with COVID, I've been going to the zoo almost every month. And my husband, after the first 3 or 4 times.
So all your photography has bars or in front of it or something.
Well, actually, our zoo here in Colorado Springs does not have bars. So it's amazing. You can be right up to the penguins. It's very interactive. So I highly recommend visitors to Colorado Springs to go to the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo. It's very unique. But after the third or fourth month, my husband was like, I'm really not having a good time doing this with you because you're loving this, you're taking pictures, and I'm sitting on a bench watching you. And so we finally just said, hey, you know what? That's okay. I'm going to go without you. I'm probably going to have more fun. I don't have to worry about, are you having a good time?
Yes.
And you can do something that makes you happy. So we both were open and honest with each other. And I appreciated that. And I appreciated him going with me in the beginning, but now, COVID's been going on for 18 months. I'm good having this alone time and just communing with the animals on my own.
Yeah. And you're not insulted or anything. You don't take it personally that he didn't want to go with you.
No, we love other things. We love hiking, great eating out, and with COVID, we're just getting it to go. We're happy with that. So we have other things that we can share. And I think that's important for your listeners, that even when you get married or you have a significant other, you still have to maintain yourself. What's important to you? What makes you who that person married? And you have to refresh that from time to time.
Yeah, you have to feel whole within yourself. I don't know. I hate that saying, like, you complete me kind of thing. It's like, if you're not complete before you met this person, then something's wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm happy alone, and I was happy before I met my husband, but life is so much more wonderful with him. But when he's not with me, I'm okay too. And I think that's important, to be okay.
Is there anything you do to kind of keep the romance alive? Do you have a date night or anything like that?
We do have a date night. So he's a big foodie. He's from Texas, so he loves steak. So every Sunday is football day, and he grills, and we have a great time. The dog participates because she knows when it's steak day too, because she gets some steak. So it's really the whole family's involved. So it's not exactly a date night. It's a date, and it's Sunday, and it's football, and it's Cowboys or whatever, and it's steak, and we have family time. And we're together, and he gets to watch the game, and I might be sitting there playing with my pictures from the zoo or whatever, but we are together and we're sharing that experience.
Right. I think that's really important, having like regular rituals, whether that's a date night going out, which again has been hard the last couple of years, or as you said, just watching TV and cuddling up. I think that's really important, just to spend time together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's been challenging. With COVID, I do work from home from time to time. And sometimes, it's so easy to you're already home. So you're in your home office and you're like, I'll just do one more email and one more email. And before you know it, 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And you would not do that if you were going into the office. So making sure during this time where you are maybe working from home, that you're still finding, when do you shut the office light off? And when do you go home mentally and be with your family, being able to disconnect?
Right. And you're pretty high energy, which I know because you and I have worked together a little bit, and, high energy can sometimes equate to high stress, right? It's just kind of goes with the territory. And I know, we've exchanged emails and texts outside of that 9 to 5 parameter for sure. What do you do to, other than kind of disconnect? Do you have any techniques you use to de-stress?
Well, first I'll highlight that when people do email, like you said, we've exchanged emails outside of core work hours. I equate emails or emails on LinkedIn. I equate that is a person on that other end, on that email, who's asking for help, whether it be, how do I move forward with the project? Can you help me with something? So I do take that very serious, to look at email and be responsive to individuals, whether they're part of my team at Space Foundation or a woman in Namibia who's looking for a mentor or role model. So I'm very committed to that. And so that does create a certain amount of stress. But like I said, when we go hiking, my husband and I, or it's Sunday date, or it's going to the zoo, I do shut the phone off and I don't look at emails or work emails during that time. I unplug and I really just enjoy being present. And that's the other thing. So many times we get focused on our phones or other things that we're not present in a conversation. We're not present when somebody really needs us. And that is a challenge. We all multitask. Women seem to be even bigger multitaskers. And I'm guilty of that as well, that sometimes we have to say multitasking is not the best. Sometimes we really have to just focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm glad you bring that up because I used to be the typical multitasker too, especially when I was working full time in corporate. And I thought that was like, a big feather in my cap, right? That I could do all these things at once. And then I finally realized, you know what? You're not doing any of them optimally when you do that. And it's so much nicer. And it's such a nicer life and work experience to just singularly focus on one thing at a time. One thing that I do that I'm pretty aware of, and I try to keep up with, is if I get a phone call, and yes, people do phone call you these days. You don't have to always be on text or email, but when I get a phone call, I want to be totally present with that person. I actually step away from my computer, step away from my laptop. I go in another room because I work at home, and I actually have a conversation only with that person. I'm not looking at the screen. I'm not looking at what's coming in. I'm not texting. I'm not typing. I'm just actually having a conversation with that person. And I try to be present. And I think that's so important.
Absolutely. The other thing I'll do when I have a conversation with someone is I smile.
Yes.
I don't know if they can tell it, but I think they can.
You can tell it. You can.
I think when you can tell, like I could just tell you were smiling then. And so I will also, when I'm talking to people, act just like right now while I'm talking to you, I'm using hand gestures. I'm smiling just as if you could see me. And I think that comes through in your voice when you have that type of conversation. And again, you're more present and you're listening. And that's the other big thing. Are we really listening to understand versus listening to respond?
Yes. Yes. And are we listening to ourselves too? Like you said, that downtime, you mentioned time with your husband, your dog, you do a lot of traveling, you have your photography, and it really does give you that balance of, well, I'm not just my job kind of thing. And that's really key for people because especially I think also for men, because men, they retire and all of a sudden they have nothing to do a lot of times because they identify themselves their whole career by their jobs. And that's tough when, the job changes or something happens and whatnot. Now getting back to jobs, you went from the Air Force into actual business. You're working at Space Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization. How was that transition from going from more of a, I guess, kind of a rigid environment into a commercial business environment?
Well, I was really fortunate. My last job in the Air Force, I worked on Capitol Hill as a Air Force budget and appropriation liaison. So I interacted with, well, I don't know if working on Capitol Hill is a normal environment, but I interacted with normal people from all over the country. So it was less about being in the military and being rigid. And, I wore civilian clothes. I interacted on a daily basis with individuals and shared things about the Air Force and why the Air Force did things or our mission and budget. And so it was a great transition role because it gave you the opportunity to, one, wear civilian clothes, and talk about
a nice
things.
Transition. Yeah.
A nice transition. And also not talk in military talk. Many times in the military government, we have a lot of acronyms. We say things that everyone has a common lexicon. And when I worked on Capitol Hill and you're talking to people from all 50 states and Puerto Rico and Guam, we're not all on the same page. So how do you make sure you're articulating your message that can be understood by everyone with different backgrounds? And so that did help me transition to working at Space Foundation, which, as you said, is a nonprofit that advocates for the global space ecosystem. And again, it carried a lot of the reasons I selected the Space Foundation over the other job offers I had. I did have some other offers to go work in corporate America. I really value what the Space Foundation does. I think they continue to serve a greater good, advocating for the space industry, bringing out the global space, the premier global space event with Symposium, but also all the educational programs, to create more access for everyone to come into the space ecosystem. It just really called to me that this is the right fit for me to continue to be a servant leader and contribute to the greater good. So for me, there wasn't a huge transition other than I got in my car on Christmas, New Year's Eve, 31 December, got in my car, my husband got in his truck and we drove for 3 days and got to Colorado Springs. and turned around and went to work, 3 days later. And just
But you
picked
also
right.
still find
Yeah.
yourself in an industry that has been traditionally, male dominated. And again, you being, I would imagine many cases, the only woman in the room. And I'm sure that there are other women that are listening who might find themselves in those situations, whether it's in their families or life situations or career, where they're in that situation. Do you have any advice in that respect about being the only woman in the room?
So there were times when I was in meetings and I was the only woman in the room sitting at the table. I did not recognize that. Other people did. Other people would say, "Oh, what's it like to be the only woman in the room?" And you kind of look around the room and go, "Huh, I didn't think about that." And again, growing up as an only child with female role models wasn't an issue. Just do it. But what I share is that that's okay. And that's okay to be the only African American or Hispanic or Native American, because our goal is we want to bring diversity to the table. And ultimately, we want to invite more diversity to the table. And since I was, 20 years ago, the only woman maybe at a table, that has changed to now maybe there's two or three or four women at the table. And at Space Foundation, we are the opposite. So we have educators and finance and nonprofits, which attract more women. And right now we are approximately 80% female employees.
Fantastic.
Well, it is and it
Fantastic.
isn't, because I would prefer it to be 50-50. I would prefer to have equal men as well, and more diversity as well. Because again, if I have too many women at the table, then am I missing other ideas? Am I missing other things? So diversity is important. In all manners, diversity of thought, diversity of gender, diversity of region. And that's how we're going to bring more equality to everyone.
Absolutely. I want to touch lastly on a topic that you brought up about being a joiner. And not everybody, like for me, I actually never considered myself a joiner. And so I'm not real active on social media. I do a little bit here and there, but it's kind of, oh, okay, I got to go on there and do that. But you're the complete opposite. Can you give anybody some advice about why that helps you and how has it helped you? And if someone's not a joiner, what can they do to get excited about that?
So we talked earlier, and my husband is the exact opposite of me as well. He's not a joiner either. When I tell him like get a friend, he's like, I have a friend, it's you. And so we're the exact opposite. I'm like, I have all these, all these organizations. I volunteer to be a mentor. For me, it helps reignite my passion for why I'm doing what I'm doing. A lot of the organizations that I volunteer at, I'm a mentor. And I don't even want to say mentor, because although I'm there to provide insight and guidance, I get so much out of meeting with proteges and young people and hearing their ideas. I had a call today with somebody. I'm going to have a call tomorrow and the next day. And that really helps inspire me to what I'm doing at Space Foundation. So for me, it helps to remind me why I'm doing this. The minute I decide I'm not having a good time doing this, then I know that this isn't an organization I want to be part of. So for me, I share with you, especially for women and women entrepreneurs or women in industries that aren't 50-50 with men. So that is the industry I'm in, which is space or aerospace. It's important to find other like-minded individuals. It is important to join organizations that can help provide you with networks and safety nets, like Women in Aerospace, UN Office of Outer Space Affairs, there's Project Management Institute. There's a number of them. You don't have to join them all, and you don't have to go to every event, and you don't have to go to every event and meet everyone in the room. But what I say is, especially for women who are entrepreneurs or looking for the next step in their career, building your network is part of that process. It's part of building your safety net. It's part of finding mentors, champions, and role models. And so you don't have to be that uber extrovert like myself, but I do recommend find an organization that you're excited about and maybe connect with one or two people, and then maybe continue to build your relationship with those individuals and share what's going on in your career, get their insight, and then of course listen to what's going on in their career, and you can share your insight with them. So this is
And I
really,
think that advice is
yeah.
great. And I think it also applies to just life, right? Not just career. Even I'm sure we have some listeners who are stay-at-home moms or are not in a career at this point in time, and having a network, a support network, no matter what you're going through, right? And we all have life challenges that we go through. And it's really important to have that go-to, right? That go-to group, that go-to person, or even to put yourself out there and volunteer to help other people. And it's so easy these days. And it's also easy for introverts, right? Because of social media.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have a number of individuals from around the world that want to volunteer for Space Foundation doing IT things or activities. So nowadays, there are a lot of ways you can be a volunteer and still be an introvert, but contribute to something that you want, that you're passionate about. Is it wildlife? Is it climate change? Is it equity and inclusion? There's a lot of opportunities to volunteer where you can find what's the right fit. And I will say, even for individuals who are looking for the next step in their career, volunteering is a huge component of that. Many of my greatest opportunities came along because I volunteered for the hard project, or I volunteered to fill in when somebody wanted to go on vacation and I filled in doing something. So being a volunteer can also be kind of that next stepping stone in your career. And I do share, you said a lot of folks could be moms. You know what? You want to join moms groups as well, or dads groups, single parents, or kids going to school. I know I have a number of friends who have children, and they love having, especially during COVID, they've created pods with other parents and how they, want their kids to go to school. And we're figuring out what are they missing during these 2 years of COVID in socializing, and their children learning about getting along with others and how do you build relationships and all of that. So I agree with you. It's not all about career focus. Again, but finding that thing that you're passionate about and then seeing who you can connect with.
Right, right. One last question, Shelly, because this is Self Power Now podcast. What is it? What's the number one thing that makes you feel empowered?
Well, I always feel empowered.
You're just too perfect.
No, I'm not perfect at all. First of all, I am the first person to step back every day on the treadmill and say, how could I have maybe done something better? So I always look at self-reflecting, but I think that, even on the days I'm not perfect, I look back and say, I could have probably handled that different, but how do I do it better? So,
but you don't dwell on it. You don't dwell on what you did, because you can't change it. You just look forward, right? Well,
you can change the way and how you engage. And the other thing is, sometimes I have a lot of women who come up to me and say, I'm not there yet. What do I do? And this is how you be empowered. It takes time. It takes time to build a career. It takes time to be a change maker. And so it's not going to happen overnight. You are empowered. And every day, what small thing are you doing to help you accomplish where you want to be in the next 1 year, 5 year, 10 years? And every day, how are you slowly working towards that? And that is the easiest way to be empowered, because you can control how you're engaging every day.
Right. Baby steps. It takes baby steps. And sometimes it takes a village as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Shelly,
that's why I was going to say, and that's why you should build those networks.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Shelly, for your presence here with us today and all of your insight. Listeners, if you'd like to connect with Shelly or Space Foundation, you can find those links on our show page on selfpowernow.com/podcast. I wish you all a wonderful day. Come back and join us next time. Thanks for listening to Self Power Now. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with others, follow it on your favorite podcast platform, and join our community on selfpowernow.com and receive 3 free happiness gifts. And while you're there, if you're looking for more ways to be happy, healthy, peaceful, and loved, check out my books and new online courses. Until next time, this is Debbie Jasoni wishing you self-power now.